listening to LA40 with Katerina Kozayas, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, Los Angeles, and welcome to LA40, where you can come and hang with us every Thursday morning. I'm excited to be here. I'm your host, Katerina Kozayas, and yes, you're listening to LA Talk Radio and LA40. This is the show, we know you're excited, where we delve into all things life after 40, because there is life after 40, and we're excited to sort of peel the onions back and find out what that means. For those of you that follow, you know that I recently turned 40, and I was sort of stuck with, like, what does it mean? You know, what should I be doing? Is there any tips or tricks or things I should be aware of? And so we come to you with a lot of cool information. But you don't have to be 40 or 50 or 60 or beyond to be listening. If you're younger, even better, because then you'll get the tips earlier. I'm joined in studio today by a lovely guest, Linda. Linda, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So today we are going to be delving into oh shit, I'm still not a parent. That's coming on the heels of a really popular show we did back in March, which was called Oh Shit, I'm a Parent Now. I had done that show because I had a lot of friends in their later 40s who, woke up and were like, how is it that I have a kid going off to college? And I remember partying in college. When did this happen? And we had a lot of good feedback from that show, but I did have some people saying to me, well, that's great, but what if you're not a parent yet? So I thought, okay, myself included, we got to delve into that can of worms. So today we're tapping into maybe you're not a parent yet. And we're going to talk about, is it okay to be a fully grown adult who maybe voluntarily doesn't want to procreate? Or maybe you do, and you're wondering, how has my fertility been affected? And, what kind of myth is out there that, maybe Hollywood is permeating that's making me feel like I've got all this time? So we're going to be joined today by Linda, who has a fascinating story. She's going to talk to us about, at the age of 46, deciding to do in vitro fertilization and what that was like for her and whether or not that was successful. We're going to keep you in a little bit of suspense. But in between that conversation, we are going to be joined by Dr. Vasiliki Moragiani. Dr. Vasiliki is a Harvard-educated reproductive endocrinologist, in other words, a fertility specialist. And she is going to be joining us to really let us know what is happening in the world of reproductive medicine and some of the things that we need to be aware of. So it's going to be a great show. So Linda, what I want to do, though, is start with you. So first of all, how was your ride in?
It was great.
Yeah.
It was nice. I was fine.
Okay.
I don't want to say
there we go. I love it. Okay, perfect. So we're going to move on. So Linda, one of the things, we were actually, folks, going to be joined by a fellow as well, because I didn't want this to be just a female-centered conversation. I had a really good-looking guy actually lined up to be part of this conversation today. And he's 44, never been married, never had kids, and he was going to give us a little bit of his insight into how he was feeling being childless in his 40s. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it last minute. So if you're a guy and if you happen to be watching, you want to join this conversation, dial in. Dial-in number is 818-570-5085. Again, 818-570-5085. Dr. Vasiliki is going to be joining us in about 5 or 10 minutes. But Linda, you and I right now, so you are in your 50s now.
Mm-hmm.
You were a younger woman back in the day,
Yes.
and of course it's younger women who are considered fertile and baby ready.
Right.
So walk me through your 30s. Have you ever been married? Were you married? Were you wanting kids?
I had always wanted children. I always thought I had my life planned out. I'm a teacher, and I was going to teach for 5 years, get married, have a family, have 4 to 6 children, be a stay-at-home mom, and that was that. And give up my teaching career and just move on with that. But as you can see, that didn't happen. So when I was in my 20s, my mom passed away at a young age of cancer, and I think that affected me tremendously. We were a very close-knit family, so that was really scary, a year of that. And then, of course, I wanted to still get married and have a family, and it took a while to get over that. And then I don't know what happened. The next thing I knew, I was in my 40s. I wasn't married, and I didn't have any children. And I had always wanted children. That was always something that I wanted to experience in my life.
So in your 30s, and that's interesting because that's really similar to me actually. I remember I had a little journal that I used to write in back in university, and I remember I was about 22, and I had written, in 5 years I'm going to be married, and I'll have my first baby before I'm 29, and I had it all mapped out and planned out, and next thing I know, here I am at 40, and no children, no husband, but having a lot of fun in between, so it's all good. They people talk about this biological clock,
right,
that women start to feel, and I want to get your thoughts on, does that really exist? Did you feel the ticking?
Completely.
Okay.
Always. Because you always hear 35, you have all these issues. And then when I was growing up, that I'm in my 50s, in vitro wasn't a big thing. I don't even know how much it was around or anything like that. Having a child on your own wasn't a big thing. It was, not a good thing to have a child on your own. It was, you didn't get married, you didn't do the right thing. So I think, and I was raised in a very religious family, so that was not even on my mind to have a child on my own. Never in a million years.
Right.
If you would have told me at this time I would be having a child, I would want to have a child on my own, I'd be like, no, that would never happen to me.
Well, it's interesting because it's sort of, you sort of hold out because you're waiting for that love to come, and the love never, the guy never shows up, and then you're thinking, well, what do I do now?
Right.
It's funny because with the biological clock, and ladies, if you're watching and you're in your 20s, and sorry, gentlemen, we're going to be a little female oriented today, but if you're in your 20s, I know for me, I always just thought, oh, that's silly, like biological clock, blah blah blah, and then when I turned about 32-ish. There really was this physical sensation that sort of came over me. And everything in my being was sort of leading me to have this incredible maternal instinct. I would see babies, I would want to hold them, I would want to have one. And so for me, the biological clock became very real physically as a sensation. And of course, that came at a time, 32, 33, 34, where you do, or at least for me, I started feeling some of the societal pressure of, well, why aren't you married yet? Why don't you have the baby yet? And so the physical coupled with the what was starting to become societal stress really threw me in my mid-30s.
Yeah, people always ask me, especially being a teacher and being around families, why aren't you married? I don't understand it. Or they say, my husband doesn't understand why you're not married. It's not, you have all this stuff going for you. Why haven't you met anybody? And, when I was younger, I did in my 20s in college meet somebody and almost got married and realized, no, I want to do the career thing first and then settle down. I'm too young to get married. And then later on, I did meet someone else, and then my mom passed away and things changed. And so it wasn't that, and I've dated a lot. I traveled too. I traveled all through Europe. I've traveled Hawaii several times, just did different things. So I did have a fulfilling life. And that's one thing my OB actually always told me. I'd seen him in my 20s, and I'd always been close to him. And he's like, you're doing the right thing, Linda. You're getting over what you need to. I have moms coming to me who got married young and had their family, and then they're like, what do I do now? So he's like, you're doing the right thing by waiting. But then he would say, okay, now you have time for 2 kids. Now hurry up.
Well, and you had this, you had this image in your head of, I'm going to be a mom to 4 or 6.
Right.
To be a mom to 4 or 6, you really have to get started like pretty early, right? So yeah, no, absolutely. We, I think as a society, clearly people are delaying having kids across all global societies right now. You're seeing an increase in the numbers. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on, being a parent in your 40s or 50s versus being a parent in your 20s?
I think it's a lot different because I think in your 20s you go with the flow. You're up all night. It's not a big deal. You have a lot of energy, stuff like that. When you get older, energy definitely does drop. You work out all the time. At least I always worked out all the time all my life. And, but your energy definitely drops and you get involved in your career and things like that. Just like you said, life happens. And I think it's a big difference when you're younger and you marry somebody and you have this family and you grow up together. And then when you're older or you're on your own or you're not on your own and you've had this life where you're used to your life the way it is. Being able to do what you want to do, being able to do your career what you want, or have a, go travel, have the money that you have. And then when you are older and you have a family, and things definitely change. But I also think the good thing is, I think you appreciate it more. I know
being a parent,
right?
Because you're probably ready for that next chapter.
Exactly.
If you want to delve into that next chapter.
Exactly.
But that's the question, and that's the thing is, for some of my 40 and let's say 40 in their 40s, 40 to 45-year-old friends right now that don't have kids yet, a lot of them are saying, and I'm starting to relate to this, is exactly your point. My life is my life now. Like I know for me, I really was feeling that panic mid-30s, and that sort of has washed itself away. If I become a mom, I'd like to be a mom. That would be great. But I'm also sort of fine if I don't become a mom, because I really love getting up on a Saturday morning and making a cup of coffee and getting back in my bed and reading for 2 hours and not having to, be at someone's beck and call. I think we have Dr. Vasiliki on the phone, so here we go. Hi, good morning, LA Talk Radio.
Oh, hi, this is Dr. Mariani. I'm calling in.
Hi, Dr. Mariani. How are you? Thank you for dialing in. I appreciate it. We're going to just turn you up a little bit here, because I'm. Can you hear?
I think I'm watching you and listening to you at the same time, so I'll stop that. But thank you so much for having me be a part of this great conversation.
Oh,
and greetings from Greece.
Yes, thank you. No,
wow.
it's fantastic. I wanted to ask you, Vasiliki, because I recognize the name as being Greek because my mother's name is Vasiliki, and I'm also Greek, so that was easy. But your last name, are you married, or was that your father's name? Is it Italian?
No, Moriani is my last name.
Oh, Moriani. Oh, I'm
Greek
sorry. It
Italian,
is
so
Greek. It is a Greek name.
No, it's a very common question.
Right. Well, it's funny because I didn't see the S on the end, so I assumed it wasn't. Oh, that's funny. Small world. Well, thank you for
That's right.
calling in from your vacation, which we very much appreciate.
No, of course.
Dr. Moriani, the question I wanted to ask you is, you're a fertility specialist, and we see a lot of things in the news. We see women having kids. Hollywood sort of glamorizes it in their 48 and 49 and 50. You have Janet Jackson, who had a child at 50, and people having twins right, left, and center. I'd like to start first of all with an explanation on what really are the statistics around female and then male fertility as we age.
Right. So first of all, again, thanks for having me be part of this great conversation, and congratulations on both of you. For both of you on bringing up these great subjects that I'm sure are in the mind of a lot of women, not just in their 40s, but in their 30s and their 20s and their 50s.
Right.
And congratulations on having had a great life, which is fulfilling, and you've done the things that make you happy, and you've done so great on your career. And there's so many women that are on the same boat nowadays, as you were saying. More and more of us, myself included, put career first and then forget to have children, right? Until it almost hits us and we say, oh, hold on, I forgot to have a child. Is it not so easy anymore? Nobody told me that.
Right.
Exactly.
So, yes, the statistics, of course, do change. A 20-year-old woman and a 40-year-old woman do not have the same chance of fertility. This is because women are born with all the eggs we will ever have. We have the most eggs before we are even born, when our mothers are pregnant with us.
Wow.
And by the time we are born, we have lost a lot of eggs already. This is a very depressing conversation. By the time we get our periods, and definitely by the time we are in our 30s and 40s, the number of eggs has significantly dropped. It never goes down to zero, but the quality also goes down. And that is something that is linked to the possibility of getting pregnant and to the possibility and increased risk of having a child with a chromosomal abnormality. A common one that we know about is Down syndrome. This does not mean that every 40-year-old woman will have a baby with Down syndrome. It just means that as you get older, your eggs are fewer and not of as great quality as they were in your 20s. For men, things are not as drastic. There is such a thing as advanced paternal age, so men produce sperm all the time. Throughout their lives, but the quality of sperm and its ability to be successful in leading to a pregnancy does decrease with age, typically later on than it does for women, usually in their 50s or so. And also it is men with advanced paternal age is associated with things such as autism, schizophrenia, and some of the other disorders that we don't hear so much about as we do with Down syndrome, for example, and older women. So there is an element in both of these cases. This doesn't mean we should all go out and get pregnant in our 20s, but it means we should if we can, but it means we should know all the facts and be prepared and know what we're getting ourselves into. And I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because there's appropriate solutions and options for women in their 20s and women in their 30s and in their 40s and even very early 50s. And this is not, even though, as you said very eloquently, the media talks about these issues all the time, there's a ton of misinformation. And sometimes I'm standing in line at the grocery store and I just want to turn around and say to people, this is not true, these are not her eggs, it's impossible.
Right.
You know, when you have a 50 or a 60-year-old woman having her own baby biologically. And it is not possible that a 60-year-old woman, or it's extremely unlikely that a 60-year-old woman will have her own, will have a child with using her own eggs. It is extremely likely using donor eggs from a much younger donor, but not using her own eggs, because at this age she probably has very few, very low quality eggs.
Yeah, and that was the question that I had, because, you know, again, we see these women and they come in. Walk us through, I'd be curious to have you walk us through what the in vitro process is like for someone. Someone comes to you and she's 44 and she decides, you know what, I want to have a child, I haven't had one. What do you do? Do you start doing some blood work? Do you start doing, hormonal checks? Walk us through the process.
Sure. If you allow me, let me take a step back and talk about how, if you are a 20 or a 30, most likely, year-old listener, or anybody who's interested in this, there are options where you can improve your chances for the future. So the insurance that you can buy yourself, so to speak, is freezing your eggs. So that means, because remember, as you age, your eggs age with you. If you age your eggs at age 30, and then you decide when you're 40 to have a child with, donor sperm, with Mr. Right that you just met, whoever it is, you can use your eggs from that you froze when you were 30, and you then assume the better chances and lower risks of a 30-year-old woman, not of your now 40-year-old eggs. So this is a possibility and an option that is available for women. And patients ask me all the time, when should I do this? Doing it in your early 20s might not be as beneficial because you might not end up using them. Doing it in your 40s might not be as beneficial because you might not have as much. So doing it probably in your early to mid-30s is the ideal time, because you kind of have an idea of where your life is headed a little bit more, and the quality of the eggs should be good.
Now, I've heard mixed things on the feasibility of freezing your eggs, though, that the technology is still not 100%. You can freeze them, but then they may not freeze correctly and they may not be viable. How has the technology advanced in the last 5 years, or has it?
No, this is actually, I'm glad we're bringing these important points up. This is a technology that used to be considered experimental several years ago. It's now mainstream medical practice in our field. We use it all the time for, think about the women who donate their eggs for other patients. Those eggs usually get frozen in egg banks, and then they get used by the recipients. So the technology has been there for many years and has been perfected. And of course, it's nothing in medicine is 100%, but the survival rate of these eggs is very high. Of course, assuming that you started with a good quality egg to begin with. That's why I'm saying freezing your eggs at 45 doesn't make a ton of sense usually. So the reason I brought this up is, again, to talk about options for all kinds of patients, and also because it's the same process as IVF. So everything begins with testing, because just by someone being 30 years old doesn't mean, or 40, doesn't mean that their egg quality is good or bad. Age gives us a very good predictor, but it's not everything. So we need to do testing, blood tests and ultrasounds, to determine the egg quality, or to get a better assessment of the egg quality for that specific individual. to determine their overall health and ability to get pregnant and carry the pregnancy healthily to term, as much as possible, of course, predict that. And then the process of IVF or egg freezing, which is the same up to a certain point, begins. And that involves very roughly speaking, of course, a preparation phase of about 2 to 3 weeks where you typically take birth control pills. There's different ways to do this, but this is a typical recipe, so to speak. And then once you get a period following the birth control period, the birth control month, you get 2 weeks of injections of medications that you administer yourself, but it's very easy to do, and people freak out in the beginning, but I've had no patients stop doing this because they couldn't do the injections. You unfortunately get used to it. So you do injections for 2 weeks, and then at the end of that, through a same-day, very simple, straightforward surgical procedure, we remove through your vagina the eggs. Going through your vagina, we get into your ovaries and remove the eggs. And in the process of freezing the eggs, we just freeze them at that point. Or in the process of IVF, we fertilize them with whatever sperm source you're interested in using, and then we either create an embryo that we transfer back into your uterus through a non-surgical, very simple procedure, or we freeze the embryos, or we do genetic testing on the embryos, which is also something very important to consider for a woman of higher age, because again, those increased risks of things like Down syndrome can be. These are genetic chromosomal testing will determine if the embryo has Down syndrome before the woman even becomes pregnant. So it significantly increases the chance of success because we know that the embryo will not implant because of a chromosomal problem.
Wow, I had no idea that was available at this point now. Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think when
Right, and I'm sorry that I'm speaking so quickly. I'm trying to compress years and years of experience into however long we have.
Absolutely. I had heard that with freezing an egg versus freezing an embryo, that it was better if you could to freeze the entire embryo. Can you talk to that a little bit versus just the egg, so that the fertilized egg?
Sure. We do have more experience over the years in freezing embryos, and this technology has been around longer than freezing eggs. But I would not, at this point, that the technology for freezing eggs is so advanced and so well established that I would not have a patient bind, so to speak, her eggs with a specific sperm source if she's not sure she's going to use that sperm source, meaning pick a random sperm donor if you're not sure you want to use a sperm donor, and then later on have because I can't bind the eggs from the sperm. Once they become an embryo, that's it. So if you're interested in preserving your fertility, I feel very comfortable recommending to my patients just freezing eggs, and then later on, when they know what the sperm source will be, then creating the embryos and transferring them back in the uterus. Of course, if we have a known sperm source, either a donor or a partner, then creating embryos is always ideal.
Right.
And is there a certain age? I've been told there's a certain age legally that the United States will not do in vitro on a woman who has embryos. Is that true or not?
It's not a country-specific age. It's more of a state and then fertility center-specific age. So typically for using your own eggs, it's going to be sometime in the 44, 45-year-old age, and that's probably the highest you're going to find. And the reason is not to punish the woman or set some sort of unrealistic goal. It's just to not have you go through a treatment that will not really significantly increase your chance of success, because I am medically doing something to my patient, and I therefore would only subject her to this simple but still surgical procedure and to the medications and the side effects for a reasonable enough chance of success. For using donor eggs, the age limits, again, are fertility center specific, but typically they're in the early 50s up to maybe 54, 55, something like that. If you have already created created embryos and they're frozen, then typically centers might let you go even a little bit higher in age, because the alternative would be destroying embryos that you've already created meant for you to be a parent. But of course, there's limits that are specific to centers and specific to each patient, depending on the overall health and all the other factors that surround their story.
Mm-hmm.
And then is there a 50% chance of that embryo, I've been told 50% chance of that embryo splits and becomes twins when you do an embryo?
I'm sorry,
when you do a frozen embryo, there's a 50% chance of that embryo splitting into twins. Is that correct, or
no? No. This is an extremely. If that was the case, it would only be twins walking around in this world. No. It's a much lower chance.
Okay.
It's slightly higher than the chance of a woman getting pregnant on her own with twins, because we're artificially, our entire field is referred to as artificial reproductive technology, so we're aiding things a little bit. It's not happening completely naturally, but the chance is not 50%. No, and freezing eggs doesn't significantly change your chance of any sort of risks, genetic risks or twin risks or anything like that.
How much, Dr. Vasiliki, how much of a basis does stress play on our ability to conceive? I asked this question because I had a girlfriend of mine who was going through university, and she was getting advanced degrees and kept putting it off. And at about 35 years old, she decided with her husband that it was time to have kids, and assumed that they would get pregnant right away, and they didn't. And was trying to get pregnant for a couple of years, and was started, as the months went by, was getting more and more and more stressed out. And she went to a fertility clinic to see about, having some assistance. And just by going to the first appointment, it relaxed her so much that the next couple of weeks she became pregnant. And this is and a second story that I'm just going to share quickly. Same thing. I have another friend of mine who, for a year they had been trying, and nothing. She goes in, has the original appointment. They said, okay, come back and we'll start doing your blood work and doing your hormonal testing. She comes in, she gets the blood work. They call her a few days later and they said, well, you're already pregnant. And again, she just relaxed. So a few friends, and so does Linda.
Actually, several friends who that happened to also, or they started the process and they found out they were pregnant on their own, or they gave up and they just said, forget it. They did in vitro a few times, it didn't work, or they were out of money, and
or
they gave
adopted
up.
the baby.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So talk to us a little bit about the mental play here.
Right. So these are very important points. First of all, and thank you again for bringing these things up and bringing awareness to this. It is, in some societies or cultures, it's even considered taboo to talk about infertility because you're supposed to, be the perfect woman who gets married and has a child and everything is great. But it doesn't work that way. No. And infertility affects a great percentage, up to 15 to 20% of people trying to conceive. It is in studies that have been done through experts in the field, it's been shown that the stress of being diagnosed with cancer is the same or even sometimes not as bad as the stress of being diagnosed with infertility or having difficulty having a child. And it might sound shocking at first, but remember that this is happening to an otherwise healthy young person who never thought this was going to happen to them, and it's changing your entire life plan, right? Because it's all supposed to fall into place and something is not. So it's a very stressful process. Stress alone, being stressed at work because I have a deadline, typically that alone, unless you're somebody who's extremely anxious, will not render you infertile. However, in general, for example, the typical example we talk about, even though it's very tragic, is that of concentration camps, where women were under extreme amounts of stress, and because of that, their body would shut down their menstrual cycles, because reproducing is of the least importance when you're otherwise stressed out, and your body cannot take care of another human being, so you stop having a period, and you preserve other more important bodily functions. Such as your brain and your heart. So when someone is stressed out, and everybody perceives stress very differently. Some people are under extreme amounts of stress and they deal with it very nicely. Other people, the simplest, what seems like the simplest thing will set them off. Either way, having stress in your life in any form, even the stress of having to deal with a fertility doctor, and going through all these tests and going through treatment, or sometimes not going through that and worrying about not taking control of the situation and not doing something about the difficulty you're having. Either way, any sort of stress, personal, health-related, family-related, can lead to irregular cycles, sometimes to no menstrual cycles, which then, of course, are linked to your fertility. And I always talk to my patients about ways to decrease stress if it's playing an important role in their lives. By definition, all my patients are stressed because they're dealing with an important issue in their lives, as I talked about earlier. So there's different ways that through acupuncture, through meditation, through and bottom line, whatever makes you happy. If it's working out, like our friend said there, or if for me, it wouldn't be working out. If it is working out, or whatever it is that makes you happy, then and relieves stress, that's what you should be doing. And if going to the acupuncturist increases stress by you having to follow the appointments and it's financially stressful or whatever the case may be, I tell them to stop going because it's counterproductive. So
that's what I
these
did.
are very important points that often get ignored because we say, that's fine, I'm stressed, but let's do something medically about it. Then, let's do IVF, I'm stressed, but it's fine. But it doesn't work that way. It does affect the success rates of what we do, and working on it as much as possible is very important.
What is the typical cost of an IVF treatment, one round?
It completely varies from...
I'm sorry? I was going to say, I suppose it varies from facility to facility, but ballpark.
Right, so it varies a lot, and it also nowadays centers, it depends on, first of all, it depends on the state you're in. For some states, for example, I used to practice in Massachusetts, almost all of my patients had almost complete insurance coverage for fertility, which is something I continue and my colleagues continue to advocate for. It is a health issue. It's not something that's in your head. It's a real disease. So it needs to be covered, but not every state covers it. So if it is an insurance mandated state, meaning the state forces insurances to cover fertility, then the cost can be much lower. And of course, it depends on the coverage. If it's not covered by insurance, because a lot of centers are becoming much and more and more sensitive to the fact that it is so financially straining for families, they often offer packages where 2 or 3 cycles are coupled together for a great discount. We're talking about thousands of dollars. So typically, a cycle is going to be in one IVF cycle from beginning to end, not in a package, just straight up cycle is going to be anywhere between $7,000 and $15,000, and this is a very broad range. I understand, but it depends on the center. It depends on what and if they're charging things separately, different techniques that we're using. So it completely depends, but that's the ballpark range. And of course, donor egg is much more expensive because you have to compensate the donor as well. And things like that. But that's the rough ballpark range.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for that. Expectations and advancements. What's coming down the pipe research-wise that we can expect over the next 5 years?
Yeah. So another great question. So what we have not been able to answer is why, once I have a perfectly chromosomally normal embryo, why don't all women get pregnant? Why, once I have an embryo that has normal 46XX or 46XY chromosomes, why doesn't every single woman get pregnant? What else does it take? So this is where a lot of the science is geared towards trying to figure out what selection methods we can use, either by watching the embryos more closely and getting more information, by watching what comes out of the embryos as they're growing in the petri dish for a few days before they go back into your uterus, by watching your uterus more closely and different hormones and factors that are released in there, pretty much trying to determine how we can improve the success rates, because we've come a very long way since 37 or 8 years ago when Louise Brown was born in England, but it's still, which was the first IVF baby, but we still are not 100% successful, not even close, unfortunately, and we're trying to improve how can we tell which embryo will be the healthy baby that you're looking for?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had also read that recently that they're working on a technology whereby they're trying to assess within about 3 or 4 months when a woman is going to go into menopause. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. What's the average age of menopause in the United States? Do you happen to know?
Yeah, it's about 51 or 52.
Okay. So, when I read that article, I thought, wow, that's interesting, because you don't really want, what are you going to be testing every year to find out if, this is your year, and then what do you do, scramble?
But even if you're not, I think the doctor can tell you this, even if you're not in menopause yet, before then your eggs might not be viable.
Right.
That's the thing that I think I didn't realize until a friend sat me down that had done the in vitro process and had a child on her own. I said, I think I'm going to wait till I'm 50 because I still have, a good cycle and everything else going. And my mom passed away before she went into menopause. And she's like, that's not how it works. So if you go in, you'll know that your eggs might not be viable even though you're still having a good cycle. So I think that's something that I didn't know about, that around in your mid-40s, it's a big difference. So you really have to think about that.
I was going to say, and then we'll let you go, doctor. But with your period lightening, because that's something, again, sorry boys, we're getting a little heavy here today, but you have this deep, dark, heavy flow when you're younger, and then as you age, that sort of dissipates. Is that a sign in itself?
Not really. So our cycles go through cycles. So we usually, in the beginning of our menstrual cycle years, our cycles tend to be pretty. They tend to be all over the place because the brain center that controls your periods has not matured yet. Later on in your 20s or sometimes in your 30s, you undergo sometimes another change in the flow of and pattern of your cycles. As I said previously, stress, weight, any change in your weight, any significant weight loss or weight gain, changes in your diet, medications, climate, all kinds, meaning extreme changes, all kinds of things could affect the menstrual frequency. There's specific disorders, of course, such as PCOS, in case somebody has heard about this, that can affect the frequency and pattern of your periods. So there are many things that can affect it, and just by having a lighter period or periods that come closer together or further apart does not mean you're going through menopause. But, of course, again, if you're trying to conceive, any change in your menstrual pattern is something that needs to be looked at more closely in case it's associated with something that could have implications on your fertility.
Right. And last closing thoughts for our audience. Anything you'd like to share or make us aware of before we log off?
Yeah, my thoughts are that, first of all, everybody's life path is completely different. You don't have to follow the, I'm getting married, having babies, path that everybody else is having. There's plenty of happy people around the world who do not have children or who chose a very different path. I'm also not trying to say if you're having difficulty having children, don't worry, it's fine, just relax. That's not the right advice. But if you are trying to have a child, then definitely seek advice sooner rather than later, because it's fine to be one of those people where you go and they call you and say you're already pregnant, than be the person who has been trying for 5 years and never sought any help. And also, if you are in your 30s and if you don't know when you will be having children, if it's not in the immediate, or trying to have children in the immediate future, then think about testing your fertility. Don't go any further. You don't have to freeze your eggs. You don't have to do anything amazing. Just test your fertility. It's a couple of blood tests and an ultrasound that can be very straightforward, and it can give you some sort of assessment where you can say, I'm fine for now. Let me take a break and see where life takes me, or let me this is not looking so great, let me do something about it and learn more about it. And again, either way, just try to educate yourself as much as possible, not on the internet, please, but by going to your physician who really knows what they're talking about and
yes,
and can answer your questions.
Well, we thank you so much for answering our questions today. It was fabulous to have you and your knowledge base here with us today. It's an important conversation, as you mentioned, and we thank you for sharing this with us. We're going to go back to Linda's story now. And you're welcome to stay on the line with us
if you having me.
Yeah, you're welcome to stay on the line, doctor. Or you can go if you need to. Either way, maybe we'll let you go so we can concentrate on Linda. But thank you very much.
I can actually watch online.
Okay.
The rest of the show. But thank you for having me. And let me know if I can be of help in the future.
Yes.
Best of luck to both of you.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. Oh, doctor, just in case anyone is looking for you, what facility are you with? Where are you working these days?
Right. So I am, first of all, I am on my professional Facebook page is Dr. Moriani, fertility specialist, and I am very thrilled to be starting a brand new fertility center in Northern Virginia called CCRM. It's not brand new in general. It's one of the leading fertility centers in the country, based out of Colorado, that actually specializes in extremely, very high success rates for women in their 40s or so. And we are starting CCRM, Colorado Center for Reproductive Medicine in Northern Virginia. And you can look us up under ccrmivf.com. And I won't take up more of your time, but I wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Enjoy your vacation. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye, ladies.
That was fantastic. So lots of good information. Yes. And that's going to lead us right into you, because you yourself did do in vitro, or started to look into in vitro as a single mom at 46. So tell us a little bit of how this story played out for you.
Well, I was actually going to an acupuncturist and for high blood pressure, and my physician was very open to it. I said, I really don't want to go in medicine. He's like, go to an acupuncturist. So I went, and I noticed that she had something that said infertility acupuncture. And so I asked her about it. I said, well, I'm thinking of having a child on my own.
How old were you now?
I was about 45, 46, around there. And she said, oh, you know what? I don't want to waste your money. Here's a card of a fertility doctor that I know is really good. Go to him, have your levels tested first, and then do it, which I really appreciated that she didn't say.
I was going to say that's a little bit of integrity
yes,
right there.
Yes, she was amazing. And so I did, and my first test, I went in and I said, okay, this is the deal. And I only have one ovary because I had ovarian cancer. So I said, okay, this is what's going on. And he said, okay, so I'm not going to waste your money. He said,
I'm going to back you up for just a minute. So you had ovarian cancer at what age?
39.
Oh, wow. So here you were, all your 30s passed you by, and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to have a child at some point, and you get hit with ovarian cancer.
Right.
Oh, my goodness.
That was very stressful. And actually, I went at the time to see if I could have my eggs frozen before, because I still had one ovary left in case I had to have a complete hysterectomy. And he was like, at that time, he was like, no, it's not, you're 39, it's not going to work. So obviously things have changed a lot since then. So I'm glad to hear that. He said the eggs aren't going to be to freeze them and then implant them and stuff. They're not going to be a good quality, so don't waste your money. So that was really heartbreaking. Luckily, I only didn't have to have hysterectomy. I only had one ovary removed, so that was fine. So I still had one ovary. So when I went into my doctor, he's like, okay, so you're 46, you have one ovary, and good luck with that. And he said, I don't want to waste your money again. Right. So he was very awesome. He could have just taken my money, and he said, and I said, okay, but I have friends who have had one egg. They do IUI, which is insemination, and they get pregnant. And I have other friends, that are older who have gotten pregnant on their own. And he said, okay, so it's possible, but not probable. And I always kept that in my head.
But it's still possible.
Right. Yes. So I said, okay, possible. It takes one egg. Great. All I need is one egg. Right. So he said, you're right. He's like, okay, I will do it for you. I, have the blood test done. We'll see how it is. So the first blood test did not go well, and I didn't feel like it was the right time in my cycle. And they called and they said, it's a no-go. It's not going to work for you.
Your levels are low.
Right. And I said, okay. And I was like hysterical, and I'm like, that's it. And there happened to be a variety show at my school, and I was like, oh God, I'm sitting at the variety show crying, going, I'm never going to have this experience, and I want this experience so bad. I'm around kids every day. And then I called him back and I said, I want to do it again. And he said, okay. So I went to the acupuncturist. I did acupuncture and fertility for acupuncture. I did fertility yoga every day. And I always ate clean. I worked out. And then I went in and we did the levels again, and he's like, called me back and said, it's a go. And I said, what do you mean it's a go? You said I can do it. I was like, my head was set. And he's like, no. He goes, your levels have totally turned around and changed.
Wow.
It's a go. So then we went, and he's like, but we're going to do, like she had said, we're going to do ultrasound to see how big your eggs are, how healthy they are. So we did that, and I said, okay, so when am I going to do IVF? And he's like, you're not going to do IVF. Don't we? It's very expensive to do IVF. I mean, I know she's in Virginia, but it's a lot more expensive in California to do IVF. I can tell you that.
Sure, yeah.
So
Well, she gave us a nice broad range.
right.
You know, yeah.
So it's more in the 30s, I think, to do it. From what
okay.
I've heard, and I know it's gone up a lot since I've done it. So, and I'm not sure. I guess it probably depends on the facility and the doctor. But and we're in LA, so it's always more in LA. So he said, let's do IUI, which is. I had a young sperm donor, which I think makes a big difference on the age of the sperm. And it was very healthy sperm, and it was someone who had already...
So now what's the difference between artificial insemination and in vitro fertilization?
So artificial insemination is they just inseminate the sperm in you.
Okay, all right.
And it just can...
Yep.
And
then if it takes,
it takes. It takes. So I did... And when I went in there, he's
versus putting in a complete embryo or an egg.
Right,
or
taking it out, taking your egg out, fertilizing it,
and then putting it back.
Putting it back
Gotcha.
in.
All right, there you
grown.
go, folks.
Right.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So after that, he's like, oh, let's do that. Your eggs are really good. Everything's good. Everything's great. So I said, okay, great. So he said, I just want you to know it's very emotional. And I went in and I said, if I have a kid, that's fine, like you.
Right.
And if I don't, that's fine too.
Right. Yeah.
But once I started the process, I'm telling you, those meds for me did and I had a lot of good advice. I had somebody who said, look, make a plan before you start the process, because those meds are really going to play havoc on your brain. So make a plan and stick to that plan. And I remember...
In what sense? Explain that a little bit.
If you're going to do it, don't change your mind, because as I was walking off the elevator into the in vitro, going to have insemination, I call my friend, I don't know if I could do this. What if I have a Down syndrome? What do I do? Da, 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 da. And she's like, what did they tell you?
Right.
Friends who have already done it. Make the plan, stick to your plan. You knew what your plan was. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So I went in and I did it. But after 2 rounds, I was like, I can't do that. It was just too much for me.
Okay,
And I
so
just
you
said,
had
I want to
2
do
rounds
IVF.
that didn't work.
Yeah.
Okay,
I said, just give me IVF. I just want a more sure plan. And I also was worried on if I got pregnant naturally, like the doctor had said, what would the baby be like? I'm older. How can I take care of a Down's child? Things like that. So I felt like with the IVF, what happens is like my doctor had it grow for 7 days, the embryo grow for 7 days, and I picked the healthiest one.
And they did all the chromosome testing, so you
know
had
what?
a little bit of that certainty.
At my time, they did not do the chromosome testing, and I don't know if it was
this
available
is about
or
8
what.
years ago? Interesting. 7, 8?
7 years ago,
Okay,
yeah.
7, 8 years ago. Yeah, I'm sure technology has advanced incredibly.
Yes, it's
and,
advanced a lot.
Dr. Moriani could have probably spoken to that, but that's
Right.
okay. We let her go too soon. So then you did IVF and?
And I have a beautiful baby boy.
Yay!
He's amazing, and he is the love of my life. And it really, having lost both parents, it really brought the family together, and he's amazing. It's not easy, I can tell you that. And my life has changed drastically, but it's the best thing I ever did.
So you had him at what age?
By the time I gave birth, I was 48.
48 years old. Wow.
Yeah, and it's called geriatric pregnancy when you're that age. And
oh my gosh.
It's difficult. I mean, it's hard to have one on your own, and you should really look into it before you delve into it.
Now, do you have any ties? Do you plan to have any ties for him with the father? Or
that's one
have
thing.
You had that conversation? I guess he's still young.
Right, he's still young, and he does know that he does not. We talk about everyone has different families. We have friends who have 2 dads, who have 2 moms, who have a dad or who have a mom. So these days it's a little different, and thank God it is. So there's all different types of families. So not everyone has a dad, not everyone has a mom. And I talk about everyone has a mother and a father, but not everyone might have a mom or a dad. So there's all different types of families, and that's what we discuss right now.
Right. Yeah. Any advice to women who maybe are in their early or mid 40s that are thinking of going that route? Any advice for them?
I say go to the doctor right away and see, as I said, if you are even fertile or viable to do that. That's so important, because I was totally misinformed. I thought I had, like you said, your cycle was fine. I thought that was fine, and that's not true. So definitely go in and find out. Also, you have to have a lot of support. I am so blessed. I have a lot of support. My son has an amazing babysitter, and his the babysitter's husband is almost like his acts like his father, does soccer with him, things like that. So
Right. Yeah. Fantastic.
so I'm very blessed.
Well, thank you for being here and for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I'm so glad the cancer has gone away. That's
Thank
first
you.
and foremost.
Thanks.
And that you have a healthy and vibrant little boy in your
Yes.
life after so many years.
Yeah.
And it's a testament, ladies, to, and especially with Dr. Moriani on the phone with us as well, advancements and things happening. Oh, we have a caller coming in. Let's see if we can take it quickly. Hi, Los Angeles, LA Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Val.
Hi. Yes. Hi, Val. How are you? Thanks for calling in. I appreciate you calling in, actually, because we were hoping a guy would call in. We have to wrap the program in literally 1 minute. But question for you. I know you're newly heading into your 40s, and we were talking about the societal pressure around men versus women. Did you feel any, or are you feeling any pressure from society or physically from your body to become a dad?
Generally, men don't have much of a pressure. The pressure that men have are usually either from family or maybe their parents wanting to have grandchildren. But, there's really no expiration date to when a guy could father a child, and we could see that in the rock star Mick Jagger, because he fathered a child, I think, at age 73. And men don't go through menopause. And also, another thing I want to squeeze in there is that the average age for a first-time dad is usually about over 25. So men are kind of a little bit on the older side when they start fathering a child. But for me personally, the pressure, it wasn't the pressure. It was a point where people around me were having kids and I wanted to as well. But after that, it's more like, it could be any time and I'm okay with it. And one thing I want to also mention is sometimes society or some cultures place pressure on, you have to have a kid so they can be able to take care of you when you get older. And I think that's not right. We shouldn't be having kids for them to take care of us when we get older.
Yeah, I think that's a throwback from the days when we used to have to tend the fields, but there's still a little bit of that permeating in society. Absolutely, there is. Absolutely. Val, are you looking forward to being a dad, or are you neutral on that point?
Well, I'm totally looking forward to it. It's just that there's no pressure. I know it's going to happen. It's one of those things you're like, this is going to happen, anytime from now. You know what I mean? But not like, it's got to happen. It must happen.
Perfect. Well, you know what? We are really right out of time. Thank you so much for dialing in. I appreciate the support and your conversation. Thank you, Val. Cheers.
Always.
All right. Cheers.
Always.
Bye now. All right. So that was a male perspective. I would have loved to delve a little bit deeper with him on some topics, but we're out of time. We thank you for watching, for being here with us. We hope we have shed a little bit of light on what it is to have or not have children as you get into your 40s and 50s. Linda, thank you so very much for being with us today. And Dr. Vasiliki Moriani, who was so gracious to call us during her vacation time while in Greece, thank you for the wonderful information that you shared. That's our show, folks. I'm Katerina Kazayas here, LA40 on LA Talk Radio, and we'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.
You're listening to LA40 with Katerina Kazayas, only on LA Talk Radio.